procrastination in the sense of building your dreams outside of your 9 to 5 is something, arguably the number one thing that keeps people stuck in the routine of them going to work, going home, and then sort of squandering the little time that they do have on whatever and keeping them in that routine forever, right? So outside of vices, outside of, different addictions that we battle with as, people, and mostly men in general, I'm speaking to here, vices are one thing, but procrastination, right? Outside of you overcoming your vices, and I would argue vices lead to procrastination, but for the most part, whatever you're aiming to accomplish, right? Whether that's making more money on the side, whether that's a second job, whether that's hitting the gym, whether that's building a business, or, like dedicating time in your day, after you get off work to study and get involved with something that's more profitable as a career, right? Like having to sit down and do that, while simultaneously having to pay bills and put food on the table, right? I think that procrastination is something that holds people back, right? And here's the reason why. So procrastination, we all procrastinate. We're all lazy, right? We all want things to come easily, right? Most people go to work forcefully, like I mentioned earlier, because of the fact that we have bills, we have things that we need to sustain to keep us alive. So outside of, people going to work, clocking in, doing something for 8 hours that, obviously they don't like and obviously is boring, it's not fun, it's work, right? Maybe it's stressful, it's arduous, it's repetitive, it's just not fun, right? Or, you're dealing with things that are stressful, you're dealing with people that are stressful, that are annoying. You come home, right? And to avoid feeling any more pain that you already felt during the 8 hours that you were at work, you sedate yourself with vices, right? And I mentioned, obviously that vices are a big contributor that I think lead to procrastination. But, even I think still, the reason why people procrastinate is just because the pain of, I think most of us haven't really envisioned a life of like pain that much to the point where we feel like we need to have a sense of urgency after we get off work, right? Like for the most part, right? If you're able to pay your bills, maybe you have some left over at the end of the month to put away, and you're getting kind of just paid just enough to sustain your lifestyle and not really struggle. That's, I think, honestly, the worst thing, because if you're getting paid just enough to go to work and then obviously come back, then that's not really going to give you too much of a sense of urgency, right? I would argue, if you have the right outlook, getting paid minimally can be a good thing, right? As far as like procrastination, because you realize, oh shit, like, like for example, people who make like $100,000 a year, make good money, 80K, 90K, in that range. For the most part, I would argue, and this isn't to say all of these people who make this kind of money do this, but I would argue that most of them don't go home feeling like they need to, dedicate X amount of hours to building, making more money or figuring something else out, because they're getting paid enough, right? If you're getting paid enough from your job, right, to where you have, a good amount of money to save, right? Why would you waste, or not waste, but why would you dedicate any more time than you have to make more money if you already make that amount of money? So, anyone making in between, I would say 30 and 50 or 60K a year, right? That's kind of the range where I think a lot of us are at, right? As far as, if you're in your earlier years, if you're in your 20s and you're kind of just working, these jobs that pay, middle to low wage, I think then, obviously you have more of a sense of urgency because you're not necessarily getting paid enough to have an excess amount, whether that's to invest or just to save. So it gives you more of a sense of urgency, right, for the most part, to go out there and figure shit out. Nevertheless, right, even if you do have some money to save in pocket, you can still get trapped in procrastination and just not willing to do anything, because if you know, right, that your job's always going to be there, if you know that, for the most part, if you just show up, if you do what you have to do, you're not going to get laid off, then what's the need to go home, right? When there's pornography, when there's drugs, when there's just time to lay about and scroll and watch YouTube videos and, entertain yourself, or, just hang out, watch sports, eat a bunch of good food. There's really no sense of urgency, right? And again, for the most part, right, if you're working 8 to 10 hours, right, you're tired, right? You come home, you're tired, and again, for the most part, 85% of people hate their jobs. You go home, you don't like, obviously, what you've been doing all day, then yeah, I mean, the want to do more, especially feeling tired, feeling lethargic, is just not there for most people, right? But again, if you've painted a picture like me, or many others, if you've painted a picture in your mind of how bad life would be, right, for 40 years, right? And that's not to say life can be bad. Like, it obviously can be worse. You could obviously live in a third world country. You could obviously have, like in a first world country, right? We have a lot of things that we take for granted. I'm not saying that those things aren't there, right? But as far as like just not being able to experience the greatest possible life that is available to you if you put in the work, right? I'm referring to that. If you're not able to justify not living that life, right, with a pain associated with not taking action, not dedicating yourself, not sacrificing, not doing things that most people won't do, then yeah, you're not going to be, the procrastination is just going to continue to eat you up and eat you alive. So even if you have, here's the thing, even if you've painted a picture in your mind of how bad life could be or how miserable you'll get, dealing with whatever you deal with on a daily basis and dealing with the constant headaches that come with your 9 to 5, no matter how much of a vision board you've painted in your mind of a doom and gloom situation or doom and gloom painting in your mind, you're still not going to want to do what you want to do. Guys, I shit you not, right? I get home every single day, right, at like 2 or 3, and I take a nap, right? Because I'm just exhausted, right? I'm tired, right? I get up pretty early. So, I mean, obviously I get a good amount of sleep. I get between 6.5 and 7.5, right? Maybe 8 on a lucky day, but I get up at 5, right? And I go to work, I get there at 6, and I basically work from 6 to 2. When I get home, I'll sit, maybe, I ain't gonna lie, I scroll for a bit. I don't scroll that much, maybe 10, 15, 20 minutes, and then I put my phone down and I take a nap, right? But after I get up from that nap, right, I have a decision in my mind to make, right? When 3:30, 4 o'clock rolls around, this is typically the time where it's like do or die. It's like, hey, I either get off my ass, right? I go to the gym, right? And, obviously do something productive that can lead to another thing that's productive, right? Or I can just continue to sit there, right? Scroll my phone, go eat a bunch of food, just sit about, lay about, and chill, right? Which, again, there's some days where that's fine. Like, I'm not saying that you can never just relax. I'm not gonna say that. But, right, on a consistent basis, if you're trying to build something on the side or, again, dedicate yourself to greatness and excellence, right, which is more than the 40 hours that everyone's forced to do, as a consistent way of doing things, right, that's not gonna fly. So 3:30, 4 o'clock rolls around, and I'm like, hey, if I don't get my ass out of bed right now, because obviously I've taken an hour and a half to kind of just relax or take a nap or just kind of decompress for a bit, right? I know in my mind it's not gonna get done, right? The gym's not gonna get done. The content that I want to shoot for YouTube is not gonna get done. Me, obviously getting home and maybe studying something or doing research for a YouTube video, right? And, maybe it's scripting something or sort of, whatever, it doesn't matter. But if I don't dedicate myself, or it could be, I'm gonna go out and do some food deliveries and pick people up, and make some extra cash, right? I know if I don't get to it, right, around 4:30, 5 at the latest, right, I know I'm just gonna sit there and scroll my phone and just lay about and just again just become a degenerate, right? Just sit there and just be in laziness all day, right? And it's not that I'm lazy, right? Obviously I just worked, all of us, right, we work 8-9 hours, so by default we're working. We're not like bums on welfare just living off the government, living off other people's money. But at the same time, right, like if you want to excel, if you want to really have the best possible life and build the dream life, right? You have to realize that the time that you have available to you is crucial, right? And your inability to utilize that time that you have is what's going to keep you stuck. It's what's going to keep you frustrated. It's what's going to keep you depressed, right? And that's another thing too. Like when you know that you have extra time on your hand and you know that you're not utilizing all that you can utilize as far as what you can do, that's when depression kicks in, right? Because again, all of us, we do the normal 40 hours, right? And that's fine. You know, obviously work is good to some degree. It keeps you busy. It keeps you away from, you know, being a bum, being on welfare, living off other people's money, complaining, you know, living off your parents, becoming fat, becoming lazy, right? Obviously, there's some aspect of just working 40 hours that's good, right? That most people don't, you know, people that are, you know, these, like, not gonna get political here, but, you know, like these people who fucking protest all day and have nothing better to do and, you know, just, again, like live off other people's money, right? By default, if you're not sustaining yourself, like I mentioned in other videos, if you're not living, if you're not able to sustain yourself with your own income and your own production, right, then by default you're going to live off a portion of all of everyone else's production, right? And that is what by default a parasite is. So anyways, rant over. But you guys have time, right? We all have time to utilize. And again, the procrastination is what is going to keep you stuck. It's what's going to kill your dream. So next time you are in that, you know, situation in your mind where you're like, fuck, like the gym or lay down or scroll or pornography or, you know, go out and, you know, work a few extra hours or just continue to lay here or go smoke some weed or just go eat some good food, right? Whenever you're in that phase, whenever you're in that situation, right? And by default, and guys, like, it's not easy. I'm not gonna sit here and say it's easier said than done to get off your ass and go ahead and go do the thing that's necessary, right? Especially after a long day, it's hard, right? And that's, guys, one thing I'll say to really kind of like bring everything together, the reason why you don't see a lot of people who are successful, the reason why you don't see a lot of people who make a lot of money, who are really, you know, just extraordinary, who bring, you know, who have mastered something, who are just exceptional human beings all around, exceptional in body, exceptional in their mind, exceptional in their finances, and just great all around, is because they haven't dedicated the time, right? And believe me, when I say no one feels like doing the work, I can tell you that for sure, because I'm working just like everyone else. I'm on my feet 8 hours a day, like most people, right? So I can tell you for sure, right, based off experience, yeah, I mean, you get tired, right? But again, do you want to keep living, like I mention all the time, do you want to be in traffic 40 years straight and go and work for someone that doesn't give a fuck about you and you know, play these work politics games and, you know, gossip games and deal with things that are, you know, just like you never would have thought you'd have to deal with, right? These little petty problems that people have with each other and customer complaints and what, again, like the list goes on, right? Or, you know, people are talking shit about you or whatever. Again, there's just a handful of endless things that I can, you know, list off here. But again, do you want to deal with that forever? I know I don't. I don't think a lot of you guys do. So again, no one feels like doing the work. I can tell you that for sure. The ability for you to do what you need to do, whether you feel like it or not, is by default what's going to kill procrastination. Obviously, you know, willpower, I think, plays some, like being able to get a lot of sleep, right? I think obviously that can play a role in your ability to be productive and, you know, endure, you know, long periods of work and arduous labor. But, you know, none of us are getting 9 hours of sleep at night. None of us get 10 hours of sleep, right? If we're working, you know, 9 to 5s and, you know, sitting in traffic and, you know, just doing things around the house, right? None of us get that great of sleep, right? Everyone's tired, right? It's like in basketball, right? Or in football or anything, right? You know, late in a playoff series or that fourth quarter, right? Everyone's fucking tired, right? The running back's tired, the lineman's tired, right? The quarterback, the receivers, every defense is tired. Basketball, same thing. Everyone's tired. Everyone's beat up. Everyone's knees are hurting. Everyone's legs are hurting, right? But again, it's like, you know, to win, to flourish and to thrive and to get ahead and to, you know, build the life that you want, that most people can't live because they simply won't dedicate themselves to sacrificing and enduring difficulty, right? Then, you know, that's the life you end up living, is just an average, mediocre life where you do what everyone else does. So I hope this can be inspiring to you guys who are, you know, obviously caught up sometimes in procrastination, just like I am, just like I think all of us do from time to time. But the goal, right? You may fuck up at times, you may relapse on a drug or a vice or something, or you may just, you know, succumb to the laziness and the sloth, right, that we all deal with because we're humans, right? We, by default, you know, we're lazy, right? So for the most part, you know, we do what we need to do to survive for the most part. But again, you guys who watch this video, you guys are ambitious, you guys are young, you guys are creative, you guys have a lot of energy, and for the most part, right, I think, you know, you guys are pretty consistent with whatever things that you need to do to get ahead, right? Whether that's, again, working a second job, whether that's spending the extra time you have in a class or in school to, you know, better yourself in your career, or really anything outside of the 40 hours that most people are trapped in. So anyways, guys, that's it. That's all. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a thumbs up. And as always, I will talk to you guys soon. Peace.